and very quickly realized I don't know where my joy time goes. I don't know where my me time goes. And I thought, I think this might be a problem for me. But at that time, the stakes were low enough. It was just me. I wasn't married. And fast forward 7 years later, I'm married, have a home. I'm working 50 hours a week on average, and I'm 4 months postpartum. So this is now 3 years ago. And for me, the stakes were a lot higher, and I still didn't have the skills for how to just relax and to just be.
Welcome to the Erie Wellness Podcast, your go-to source for all things health, wellness, and living your best life right here in Erie. I'm your host, Lauren Brunetti, and I'm so excited to have you here. Each episode will dive into conversations with local experts and wellness professionals who are making an impact in the world of health and well-being. Before we jump in, be sure to like, share, and comment on this episode. We love hearing from you and seeing our community grow. Now let's get started. Welcome back to the Erie Wellness Podcast, everyone. I am so excited for today's guest, Kait. She is the sweetest, and I had the chance to meet her in person this past Saturday at a women's wellness brunch I hosted, and I knew right away that it was a smart decision that I had said yes to having her on the podcast. As someone who personally finds it difficult to relax until most of the items on my to-do list are checked off, I am really excited for this conversation. Kait knows that feeling all too well. For years, she thought the only way to finally relax was getting everything done. But as a full-time mom, working mom, wife, and just being a human being, she realized that that list just never stops growing, which I feel like we all can relate to. She found herself stuck in a cycle of doing without ever feeling restored or present. And everything changed when she discovered acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, an evidence-based approach rooted in the science of behavior analysis. As a board-certified behavior analyst with over a decade of experience, Kait began applying these strategies to her own life. Now, as the founder of Actualize Wellness, Kait helps other high-achieving women break free from burnout and perfectionism so that they can live more intentionally and authentically. Kait, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I am so looking forward to this conversation. But before we really dive in, can you share a bit about your journey before specializing in ACT, and what was life like for you as a full-time working mom, wife, homeowner, doing all the things?
All the hats. So before I jumped in to acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, actually it's a play on words because that's a component of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at, it probably started about 10 years ago. And up until that point, I had always been able to get through the to-dos of life and then have my peace, my joy, my whatever time. But when I started my master's, I was working full time, and then I'd come home and I would do my schoolwork, and very quickly realized I don't know where my joy time goes. I don't know where my me time goes. And I thought, I think this might be a problem for me. But at that time, the stakes were low enough. It was just me. I wasn't married. And fast forward 7 years later, I'm married, have a home. I'm working 50 hours a week on average, and I'm 4 months postpartum. So this is now 3 years ago. And for me, the stakes were a lot higher, and I still didn't have the skills for how to just relax and to just be, despite my to-do list being unfinished. And so that is when I sought ACT for stress management for myself. And a lot of practitioners who specialize in ACT, most start with a personal story. And so I'm no different in those regards. And I was able to see firsthand how learning this new set of skills and processes really opened up my world. And I say this and it sounds cheesy, but to truly live a more liberated life.
Mhm.
And yeah, at that time, I was in a place of kind of just running on a hamster wheel of autopilot. A lot of to-dos, a lot of living in my head, just trying to focus on the next thing that needed to happen.
Mhm.
Um, and it wasn't a place that provided a fulfilling life. So I looked for a strategy to change that. And as a behavior analyst, I wanted something that was behavior analytic in nature. Um, and luckily, I knew of ACT, but I had never practiced it at that time. And but I knew it was a framework that I could relate to and that I would align with. And so that's why I proceeded with ACT. And it was so beneficial that, I now get to share that with others and have turned it into not just a lifestyle skill, but my career. And yeah.
Mhm. Well, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. I know that many other women are going to relate to it, and I'm really excited for what you're starting with Actualize
Mhm.
Wellness. As you were talking, I was looking back at kind of my timeline of things, and when I was working full time before having kids, like it was all manageable, but of course time started to fill up, but then especially once I had kids, yeah, that to-do list, it was like the weekends were always filled with things to do. You lost the time to relax. You like stopped doing like all the things you would normally do on the weekends, like the little chunks of your time, whether it was like going on a hike or doing something like that. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more about some of your tips and tricks and mindset mentality and everything like that as we dive into this.
Yeah.
Um, so you described feeling ragged, irritable, and distracted, and stuck in a cycle of never-ending to-do lists. Was there a turning point when you realized this constant doing was affecting your well-being, like something specific that really just was like, I've got to change?
Yes and no. I think all around it was a slow build.
Mhm,
Um, but something that was very startling was more so than ragged and distracted was feelings of rage. That was something that was very foreign to me, but very small inconveniences would cause a very intense reaction where I didn't know how to handle that. Um, and I was a stranger to it. I didn't have the tools, and I was in a very busy time in my life
mhm,
um, to where I just very frequently reacted with that. And that was not healthy within my marriage. It wasn't healthy for my son. It wasn't healthy for my employer. I mean, it was across
mhm,
the board. And so I think that was a very scary thing to kind of notice and not really know how to handle, feeling like I was either compelled to react in this way that really didn't align with how I saw myself or kind of press it down.
mhm,
And so I think that was kind of the first startling piece of it. And then during that time in my life of I was a working mom, but I was also a work from home mom. So my son was home with me while I was working 50 plus hours a week.
mhm,
And my physical well-being was not a priority. I knew that it was something that was important to me, but I wasn't making time for it. Um, and whether that's because of the broken sleep or the busy work hours or being a new mom or all the above,
mhm,
um, that physical component was being significantly impacted. And so the final step was what you had already mentioned, where my peace of mind. I was no long the weekends were meant for the errands and the chores and everything that needed to get done within the home. It wasn't spent on dates, on hiking, on family time. I mean, it was family time in the sense that we were all together and tried to make the most out of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I really just chalked it up to like, well, this is just the season of life, and this is just how I'm reacting to it. And so I guess, once we push through and get to the other side, somehow there'll be sunshine and rainbows. It'll just happen.
Mm-hmm.
But it just got to a point for me where I recognized that I just wasn't showing up as who I wanted to be, for the people that mattered the most around me. And I wasn't being there for me, like for me, the way that I wanted. So,
Mm-hmm.
it took a while. You're postpartum. There's a lot going on during that season in your life, and there's already so much that is changing. So it took, the better part of months to kind of get to a point of saying, okay, there's something out there that needs to be helping with this right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're like that. My to-do list needs to be filled with other things that fill my cup instead
Yeah,
of just like the
yeah,
mundane weekly things that need to get done. And especially when you're looking at yourself and you're like, that's not me. Like I don't react like that, but yet I am reacting like that. Like I know better than that. So,
right. Well, or just, hey, that's not something that I care to have me react this intensely about. That something didn't get done, or that, you know, feeling like the tasks aren't evenly distributed among the household, and it's something so small.
mhm,
And really looking at myself like, what's going on here?
mhm.
Yeah.
So many women, they feel like they can't relax until everything on their list is done. How did that mindset affect your energy and your presence in daily life?
It took all my energy and all my time. That is what I lived by. I remember having conversations with my husband, saying, "Well, we can't do that until this gets done because I won't enjoy it." And
Mhm,
really being rigid in that thought that the only way to truly have a peaceful mind is for the list to be done. I was really stuck and caught up with that for a very long time. And you even see it now as reels on social media where it says like
mhm,
my mind with the chaos and it's really noisy, and then everything is cleaned up and it says my mind without the chaos. And there is some truth to that. But when you are not in a place where you're able to maintain that, and the chaos in your head just keeps growing, that's when it becomes a problem.
mhm,
Is like, okay, well, hey, this might not be realistic to hit that same level of management and, strategies that we once used to have for our home, and how we run it together as a team. And that just doesn't happen on broken sleep and long hours and on-call weekends and a new baby.
mhm,
And so let's sometimes you kind of have to stop pushing a round peg into a square hole kind of a thing,
mhm,
and learn something different. But to answer your question, that is what I lived by, was once everything is done, then I can relax. And very quickly I learned, even just as a homeowner, things aren't done. Projects are unfinished constantly. Um,
mhm,
and waiting to live my life until everything was done, I'm not a patient person. And eventually, when I realized that that's exactly what I was doing, I was waiting to really enjoy my life, to have vitality back as part of my day to day. Um, it was like, no, we're not going to do it this way anymore.
mhm. And I feel like a lot of men and women probably can relate because I'm picturing some of the reels that you mentioned, like, and it could be vice versa. Like either it's the man who is like, I can't relax until the to-do list gets done, or they have them where they're showing like the opposite person in the relationships who's like, I need to relax before I can get the to-do list done.
Yeah,
And it's funny how like
right.
sometimes they're completely different. Some people have more similarities, but it's kind of learning like what your other person like
Yeah,
needs to and understanding them as well. But
absolutely.
for someone who hasn't heard of acceptance and commitment therapy or ACT, how would you describe it in everyday terms?
So, ACT is a behavioral practice that teaches people how to accept difficult thoughts and emotions while committing towards values-based actions that move them towards a meaningful life.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that the primary purpose or the main aim is to teach psychological flexibility,
Mhm,
and that is the ability to adapt, be present in the current moment, and be engaged in a way that serves you, in a way that's in line with your values, even when life is challenging.
mhm. Which
So,
is probably kind of hard. I mean, I'm sure you could be good at it for a day, but then you kind of lose it and you go back to your old ways, and then you're a
yeah,
real stickler about things, and you're like, "Oh, wait." Um, so I feel like it's constantly talking to yourself.
yeah, it really is. And, one of there's a lot of metaphors in ACT. And one of them talks about how, your values are kind of like direction. It's not
Mhm,
so much a goal. And so you could think of it as if you are wanting to go west, you can go west and you can kind of sway this way and sway that way. But as long as you continue to move west, you're fulfilling that bigger value. You're fulfilling that meaning.
mhm,
And so it allows for forgiveness and compassion, if you don't do it perfectly one day. And, you can ask yourself, well, did I still show up in a way that prioritized whatever value that was? And maybe it was on a lesser scale than what you thought you were going to do. But as long as that answer is yes, you're still persisting in a way that is driven by your values, and you're still making small behavioral changes towards a more meaningful life in that sense. And so it's a very compassionate approach to behavior
mhm.
change. And there was something else that you had said. Oh, that there's another very common saying called, commit, slip. And a lot of times we commit, slip, and then you get really hard on yourself, or you say, I can't do this, or there's some sort of negative self talk. But ACT is about commit, slip, and recommit, and commit, slip, and recommit. Um, it's a very forgiving practice,
Mhm,
and it allows for a lot of variability in your actions, because it's built on just small behavior changes. You don't have to do it perfect the next day, as long as you did a little bit more that next day and you're still in line with your values, you did it. And that's
mhm. So what does it look like in practice? Say, like, you're a person who has a hard time, like, sitting down in a cluttered room, before you can actually either sit down and, like, engage with your family or get down to work. So what does it look like? You just sit down in the space even though it's messy and just, like, force yourself to do it, or what do you do?
So it depends on the person. It's very highly individualized. And so, as a behavior analyst, part of my job is first identifying the function to certain behaviors.
Mhm,
We consider both internal um, behaviors like thinking and feeling to be under that behavioral lens. And then also anything that you could see, like actionable things like walking and talking and things like that.
mhm,
And so it truly depends on the individual. But let's say we go through assessments and, through the intervention process a little bit and kind of come to find that maybe the function of these internal voices or feelings that are happening when you're in a chaotic environment is because there is some sort of a story you've been telling yourself of, well, in order for me to be a good mom, I need a clean home. And so if my home isn't clean, then that means I haven't done my job in order to provide for my kiddos. I'm just pulling a random example from a random hypothetical potential client. But it's that story that they're telling themselves that they're stuck on. And so my job is to be able to offer replacement behaviors to that story and to say, okay, well, what else? If being a good mom is what you value, and you've been doing this through behaviors of keeping your home clean, but at this time in your life, it's no longer realistic to maintain that same level of that cleaning schedule, that Sunday reset to get all 3 bathrooms deep cleaned and your carpet vacuumed and the floors are mopped and you're ready to go for Monday. Maybe that's not happening in this season. So tell me, what are some other ways behaviorally that you feel you can stick to that value of being a good mom without needing to stick to the story in your head that part of that looks like keeping a clean home? Or, at what point could you bring down that bar to where, yes, you still have a clean, livable home for your family, but maybe let's see if those expectations aren't currently realistic for right now, and where are you willing to let go of? And then the work comes in learning how to relate to those inner thoughts that will continue to pop up every time you leave a room unfinished and every time, some box isn't checked. But where the beauty really comes in is that if you can expand on that story to say, I'm also a good mom by being present with my kid while playing a board game. And we do the work to focus on those internal behaviors and to make that pivot. And you are able to sit there and be present with your kiddo. I guarantee, as long as it is values driven, you will start to see the immediate benefits of that through feeling, through thought. And you have to get through that in order to experience those consequences and see how positively reinforcing they are. But there is a way to get there.
So you talk a lot about letting your thoughts and feelings come along for the ride. Can you share a real life example of what that looks like, especially when facing a long to-do list?
Yes. Okay. So kind of ties into what we were just talking about. But as a mom, working mom, and building business on the side, I could walk into any of my environments and have at least 5 things that are calling my attention. My mind is very good at reminding me of all the things that need my attention. And so I want to digress a little bit and kind of explain why that is, and then kind of circle back around to the question.
Yeah, tell us why our brain does this.
So I love this part of it. My bachelor's is actually in neuroscience, and so I love the brain. And there is a component of ACT that is based in the physiology of the brain and how we process information. And so I really appreciate it for, kind of being like multi-level practice in that way. So the underlying theory to the practice of ACT is called relational frame theory. And I'm not going to get into it, but it essentially supports, through decades of evidence-based research, it supports how language and cognition develop over time. And so starting at a very young age, there are certain rules that we are told, like, don't run in the street, you'll get hit by a car. And so you're like, okay, well, your brain learns, I don't run in the street, so I won't get hit by a car. It's there to protect you. But as we develop and as we get older, and things in life become more complex, we still pick up other rules through society. And all of those rules at one point, you learned them because they worked. And when it becomes a problem is when they no longer work. So kind of going back to our example with the clean house, maybe that worked at a different season in your life and you were able to manage it. And when you did get done cleaning your house, you felt good. You had time to be present. You felt, that quieted mental chatter that we were talking about.
You could watch a feel good TV show for a couple hours.
Yeah, exactly. You could go on that hike, whatever that is. And so at a certain time they worked and your mind learned that. It learned to protect you. And so in this example, it would be, okay, so in order for me to have joy, I had to do this thing first. And so your mind tries to carry those rules, but where it becomes a problem is when they're misdirected and the situation no longer fits the rule. And oftentimes what we do is we try to come up with a variation of that strategy to say, oh, okay, well, that's not working. So how else can I control for this? Or, it's really uncomfortable for me to sit in a environment that isn't spotless. And so, let my problem solving part of my mind step in and try to figure out new rules to address the situation. And oftentimes what you learn is that these feelings that come up, the overwhelm, the discomfort, the anxiety of not having all the boxes checked, they're normal human experiences. And sometimes the answer isn't a new strategy, it's that acceptance piece that we were just talking about, and being able to identify the times where it's like, hey, my mind is creeping in and trying to hook me and to act a certain way because it's trying to protect me. And the more self-aware and the more noticing that we can do of those times, the more we can look at those situations and say, is this still a situation where that rule applies? Is it helpful to me? And if the answer is yes, go ahead and listen to it. And there's something in there. And if it's no, then those are the times to bring those thoughts and feelings along with you for the ride. It's that acceptance piece and to know that they're not going to quiet down. Your brain is going to continue to remind you of all the things that have worked for you in the past. And so you can think of it as being on a bus and your thoughts and your feelings being like noisy backseat drivers. And so they're like, okay, it's turning yellow, hit the brakes, or, oh my gosh, did you see that car just pull out in front of you? And they're yelling all these different things. But as long as you are the bus driver and you're not saying, oh, that person's yelling at me to, hit the brakes, they better take control of the wheel here and step in. They come along for the ride. Your brain is not wired to forget things, and so they're going to continue to be there. But you can just think of them as noisy passengers on a bus. And as long as you maintain driving the wheel, and knowing that they're just going to come along for the ride.
What would you say are either some of the patterns or just like things that are really causing burnout for these high achieving women that are juggling career, family, home responsibilities?
Yeah, definitely perfectionism. And I think when we think about perfectionism, oftentimes we think about workaholics and overworking and things like that. But I feel like I haven't heard it as commonly talked about, but procrastination is a very common symptom of perfectionism. Somebody who is afraid to have their product not be the best of the best, as well thought out, is actually a very common symptom for perfectionism. And so that falls under that umbrella of putting your life on hold until you have it all figured out, or until you have whatever you're trying to put out there be in the very best condition that it can be. So I think perfectionism, and then, the way that we traditionally think about perfectionism in terms of like overworking and workaholism and things like that. For me, just a little side story, I took a values-based assessment, and I learned you essentially rank different domains in your life and how much on a scale of 0 to 10 you value it. I've always been a very hardworking employee. I'd work through breaks. I'd cover other people's shifts. I would work on call weekends, on call evenings. That was just something I was really good at. And I had a lot of external praise that just reinforced that behavior. I was constantly told, thanks for stepping up. Thanks for being, what do you call, what's the word I'm looking for? I blanked.
Just like a standout employee,
Yeah, something like thanks for being a great team member, something like that. And so I worked a lot. And when I took this values assessment, my health, my value for parenting, my marriage, those are at the top of my list. I really don't care about work. If you ask me about it, I really don't. I valued it at a 6. But the second part of the assessment is how consistent are you being with each one of these values? And I was being over consistent. I ranked myself at a 10 out of 10 for how consistent I was with work. So I valued it at a 6, but I was acting like I valued it top of the list. And so I think that perfectionism and overworking, when you're doing it and it's not aligned with your values, eventually you hit burnout. And the opposite is also true. Sometimes you're in a career. I actually just published a blog post about this, but that, and I spoke to somebody at your retreat, or not retreat, but your wellness event last weekend, that burnout doesn't always mean you need to resign. It doesn't always mean that you're overworking and, this isn't a job for you to be in. And so I think a lot of the way that I help with that is through values clarification, and really helping somebody kind of zoom out from what is their situation and what are they on autopilot with. And let's go back to the basics and what do you care about? And based off of that, you can make a decision when it comes to like overworking and burnout. You can make a decision of, maybe there's some other changes that I need to make, but I am in the right career for me. And maybe we need to work on some of that acceptance piece that might just inevitably come along for the ride. But you can persist with a career, even if you feel like you're hitting burnout, if you have identified that it's in line with what you care about and their mission is in line with what you care about.
It's funny you said that about the procrastination, because I had the idea of the podcast back in early fall of last year, but it took me a while to wrap my head around should I do it? Should I not do it? And then I finally decided I was going to do it. Was I needed the new year.
Yeah.
And I feel like some people feel like that with a lot of things. Oh, I'm going to start it in the new year.
Yeah.
But that's what I needed, was that push of okay, you can't persist, can't keep doing it. This idea is just sitting in your head. You just have to do it. You have to put out the episodes, even though they're not going to be perfect. You're going to learn along the way. And I finally did it, but it took all fall long and
Yeah.
part of winter before I finally, like, told myself it just
Yeah.
has to be as is and you'll get better and you'll grow, which is funny because I tell my kids the same thing. Like,
Right.
"You're never gonna be
Well,
perfect at the very beginning, like, this is the
yeah.
time for you to learn." But, like, you need to keep telling
And
yourself the same
I've
thing.
yeah, I've learned about that through Act 2 is that kids at a young age, they very much so have a let's try and see mentality. And
Yeah.
as we get older and we have more experiences and certain things have worked for us and certain things haven't, or we know of people where certain things haven't worked for them, and we're fed all this information, we have less of a let's try and see mentality.
Mhm.
Um, and I think a huge, part of ACT is you learn from some of that discomfort along the way. Like if you try something and it doesn't go perfectly, or if you try something and it doesn't go at all in the direction you think it's going to go, one of the processes of the 6 core processes of ACT teaches you to just take that, learn from it, and then move forward in a way that takes what you've learned. And you do that as a kid.
Mhm.
But we need sometimes behavioral intervention to just to remember it. I know I did. I mean, I'm a behavior analyst. This is part of what I do, and I mean, I had to go through it myself in order to kind of reshape the where my head was at the time. So
Yeah.
I think another common pattern is living by shoulds. And so that kind of goes back to your original example too of like, well, what if, it's a mom who's unable to be present because, I should be cleaning right now, and focusing on shoulds kind of running what's important, that I should be doing this. Um, and I think that's another very common pattern that I see is that responsible, high achieving women are trying to make sure that they are responsible. So, what are all the things that you should do when you're responsible? And they're trying to get through all of those things.
Mhm.
And when you're running your life in a direction of shoulds, I think eventually one day you wake up and you say, "What am I doing? Like,
Mhm.
where am I in all of this? Where are the things that I want to be doing? What are the things that bring me joy that um, that are hobbies and truly allow me to relax because you've just been caught up in the shoulds." And
Mhm.
so that's another common behavioral pattern that we work through.
You
Also,
offer one-on-one support. What does that look like for someone working with you, and who would most benefit from it?
I am trained in behavior analysis, so I create programs. I implement the programs, and we take data on behavior to assess for progress and address barriers along the way so that you can increase behaviors that you want to be seeing more of. And we work to decrease behaviors that serve as barriers to a more meaningful life. So,
Well, Kate, thank you very much for today's conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I know that a lot of people in that are listening to the podcast are going to totally relate to our conversation today. As we kind of wrap things up here, I'll make sure that I include your website, contact information, so that people can get a hold of you. Do you have any last words for our listeners as we wrap up today's episode?
part of what I want to do is just really bring awareness. I think you can relate to that. I
Mhm.
just want to bring awareness to a framework that works, it's evidence based, and I want to just shout it from the mountaintops to anybody who can benefit from it. And I appreciate you allowing me the space to be able to do that with our Erie community.
Yes. Well, thank you. No, I feel like all of our conversation is going to be super relatable to everyone that listened to today. And ACT is really just a great tool that people can be using, especially if a lot of our conversation today resonated with you. Like, take a listen, really understand what are the behaviors that you're doing and kind of self sabotage so that you can get to a position in your life where you're really just enjoying things. And,
Yeah,
this isn't a sustainable way to live if you're constantly feeling like this.
yeah, yeah.
Alrighty. Well, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
All right, friends, before we wrap up, here's the part I need to read to you. You know how it goes. This podcast is presented solely for educational purposes. I am just your friend behind the mic. I'm not a licensed therapist or doctor, and nothing you hear here is meant to replace the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or any other qualified professional. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you back here in the next episode. That's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Erie Wellness Podcast. I truly appreciate you being a part of this journey. If you loved today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. For more daily wellness inspiration and behind-the-scenes content, be sure to follow me on Instagram at the Erie Wellness Podcast. I can't wait to connect with you again soon.